this,
Sure.
assuming it's all right.
Yes.
So welcome, Carol. Appreciate you coming back, and it's good to see the three of you. Thanks for joining.
Delighted to be back with you all. And I think we've got another date coming up in a couple of weeks that I hope you'll put on your agenda about photography and portraiture. Today, what we're going to be talking about is the climate change show at the museum. And Zach, I think, is going to start to pull up our PowerPoint. This one's a little bit different for us in that it's the work of 3 curators, not just one. So there's Asian material, there's photography, there's European material, indigenous artists too, and artists from North America and Central Asia and the Southern Hemisphere. And just, and here we go. This is there we go. And we're back.
Yeah, I was peeking at it already.
It's so cool. It's so cool. And Priscilla has been, right? But I'm guessing nobody else has been yet. The amazing thing is it's a huge variety of media. There are videos. It's not a huge show, but there's videos, there's textiles, there's photography, there's mixed media. But the one thing everybody has in common is this deep, deep commitment to reflect the impact of climate change on indigenous communities. What does that mean to tradition? What's it mean to food production or security or general well-being or objects in those communities? And I'm going to show you the first image. One of the central piece in the whole show is this. And this is an extraordinary piece by Nicholas Galinan, who's a Tlingit artist. And it is obviously a very, very commanding piece that really makes you think about the impact on not just the human community, but the animal communities as well. And that call for accountability. This artist is really interested too in commodification. And this idea here in this piece called We Dreamt Death is that this hunter's trophy of the bear seemingly melts right into a bear rug. And that power of thinking about the life of the bear turning into this kind of commodity for tourists is a really powerful one, I think, for Nicholas Galinan. So I'm going to go into the next image. I'm going to also show you both the pieces in the show, and then when we get to an artist, I'll show you just to fill out a little bit more about that artist, maybe a couple of things that aren't in the show, but by the same artist. So this is also Nicholas Galinan, not in the show though. And this is a painting on hide. And I don't know if you can see what's happening here in this, but we're looking at a hide that's been painted blue, and we're looking at what looks like a floor plan or a blueprint. And the idea of this piece is called Architecture of Return and Escape. And what Galinan is thinking about, and I think what many people are thinking about, is that this is a floor plan. The idea is he feels, and most communities feel, that many pieces just are not appropriately living in art museums. They just aren't. He said that the cost, the process required for indigenous communities to travel, to visit a sacred artwork is just absolutely limiting. And this I thought was really interesting. He said museums can't care for objects in cultural and spiritual ways. I think the spiritual part is very, very intriguing. So this piece is his blueprint, his escape route. He said the objects from many indigenous cultures, and this is his phrase, are unwilling visitors to the museum. And this work is for him an escape route for that object to say, I'm getting out of here. He said many objects, of course, were appropriated, were stolen, or sold under duress, and again, need to return home to their communities, both for their own health and the health of the community itself. So you got to admit, that's a very, very intriguing idea. And this is something now all curators are thinking, is that a piece that is supposed to be here or needs to be with its own community? But this one is called Architecture of Return. Next image, please. This is another work by Galinan and his brother. Together, they have formed a partnership their name together is Leonard Get in the Car. Leonard Get in the Car. I like that. And so this is another piece, that same idea. This is on deer hide. And what they've done here is use images from a kind of like a 1980s, like a video game called Space Invaders, but replace the elements with teepees and arrows. And again, the metaphor here for Galanin and his brother is colonization. To him, he said, well, it's almost like a space alien invasion. He said the space aliens have no relationship to the land that they seek to invade, but they see resources that they might want. So for him, this idea of colonization and pushing indigenous groups off the land, he said, well, that's for him, that is like an alien invasion. And again, it's just so interesting, the idea of pop culture and these other themes all, together in these pieces, but also the pieces using non-traditional materials, non-traditional in European sense, but very traditional indigenous communities like hides and actual bear as well. Next image, please. This is an artist named Frederick McDonald, who's Woodland Cree. This is a piece called Autumn Harvest. And here, it's kind of interesting. It's two pieces that work together in almost like a diptych. And along the top, what joins them is this really powerful, deep, rich blue band that joins the sky, and then a kind of a paler blue band. What you can't see unless you're right on top of this piece is that in the paler blue, swirling around are all images of animals and important animals in like indigenous cosmology, who all seem to be looking over the land. Interesting thing here too, in his work, he said he's always thinking about the relationship between indigenous communities and the energy industry. He said this is a difficult one. He said he worked for a time as a pipe fitter, but he is also an artist, and he realizes again that energy companies can have a very, very destructive impact on environment, tradition, community, but as he says, also provide employment in many indigenous communities too. So this uneasy combination of, again, on the left side, traditional images, and then, the big, fuel truck on the right is a really intriguing idea. Next image, please, is also a Frederick McDonald. And again, that same idea of, traditional imagery, hides traditional images of animals and birds, and of a kind of a cosmology is very much part of Frederick McDonald's work. Next image, please. Jolene Rickard is a professor at Cornell and an artist as well. And you may remember some of her works being displayed at the Johnson in the past. This one is called The Sky is Darkening Coming Home. And it's interesting too, because it also is mixed media. The base of the piece are photographs of, from the Lab of Ornithology, of passenger pigeons, which are now extinct. And at some point in the 19th century, there were so many, the accounts of the time said the sky would be absolutely black with the sheer number of passenger pigeons. They have all been killed now and are extinct. So she's got the passenger pigeons in the background. And on the front of the piece, she's got these little pieces of, little tree branches. And on top of the tree branches, she has put beadwork from master beaders from the Tuscarora. So these are little dimensional bead birds that are actually, projecting out from the piece. And again, for Jolene Rickard, it's the idea that we have lost so much, but there are really important traditions that remain. And those traditions are alive and well in the Tuscarora, bead workers. So it's a really interesting thing that she wants to know. This is a living tradition continuing, but look at what has been lost and look at what we mourn for in the background. Next image, please. This is one you may remember from right before the pandemic, the immigration show. If anybody went to see that, This also was a work of Jolene Rickard's, Canoe Return. And so this is a very, very old birch bark canoe that was in the middle of the lobby downstairs. And then these were little cutouts, laser cut images that went around the canoe, all kind of documenting various events in the treatment of local Cayuga and Haudenosaunee groups, including the destruction of their crops and the taking of their lands. And that was all around the canoe. And then you kind of walked around the whole thing. So again, really, really powerful piece that made you think about Indigenous groups and climate and change as well. Next image, please. This is a work by Maureen Grubin. It's called We All Have to Go Someday. Do the best you can, love one another. And this too is made of hide. And what we're looking at here is a deer hide. And what's mapped on the surface with colored thread and grommets and rivets is punching the pattern of the artist's father's angiogram. So what we're looking at, again, he was having open heart surgery at 90. And this was the pattern, again, of that angiogram. But it also, Maureen Grubin says, makes her think of migration patterns, caribou migration patterns, and a map itself. And that idea of the hide is a storied map. And the hide maps, in the artist's thinking, both the body and the land, and follows the blood vessels from kin and animal trails, which is really, really interesting. So many of these artists make the connection over and over again that our own physical health is intimately tied to the way we treat the environment. And that health piece, again, if the environment is not healthy, you will not be healthy, period. But she has such a neat, vivid way of showing us all these things are connected in her artwork. And this too, you got to see this one in person, because it's got just such power to see the hide and these colored threads and these little map trails and human trails that are right on the piece. Next image, please. I think I got some more details of this. Again, you can see these little grommets and sequins that are on the hide. And I gotta say, just the different materials are fascinating. I keep thinking, Priscilla, for a person who I know is into just textiles and making each one of these, you think, well, how in the world did she do that? But I love that these are very non-traditional. And many of these artists are thinking, how can I create that, but in a totally new way? But this is so intriguing. I'd love to have seen this being made. And I think we got one more image of it. Yeah, and the colors she chose, they're just absolutely so rich. And I've no doubt they probably have great significance as well. But the play of the color against the hide, and then those little sequins, it's just a really interesting idea. But again, many of these artists have that same concept of tying the natural world's health to your health and to your community's health as well. There's also a video in the show, we'll go to the next image, by the same artist, Maureen Grubin, and it's called Stitching My Landscape. And Stitching My Landscape, this is just one little still from it. But in her words, she said, artists are important as activists. It's about respecting what you have and taking care of it, whether it's land or animals, all things that help us survive. And what she's done here is she has drilled 111 little holes in the ice. And she's taken this big red broadcloth and she has created this stitching pattern. And this is huge. This is a massive piece. It's a huge, I think you would call it land art, her first large scale land art. And it, just like the hide, is connected to the ideas of memory, family, and healing. And this idea also connects to an early memory of hunting with her brother and the intestines of the seal on the ice stretched out. But the idea of stitching my landscape, pulling pieces together, and like in stitching or repairing a textile, you are pulling the pieces together, or even stitching a body together. You've got to pull the pieces together. And that's what she does in this. And so it's a huge piece. I think it's 1,000 feet. And there's something like 300 yards of this red cloth. And I'll show you next image, please. Yeah, so this is it. It's a really neat little video where she is doing this, and what you can hear, again, there's a little sound component. That's the chisel in the ice. But I love that metaphor of stitching my landscape and of pulling together pieces that have been pulled apart. And this, again, it's very literal, but it really works. The idea of pulling together, of knitting together. She says, I draw inspiration from and am part of the land, which is, again, something I don't think all artists say. But I love the fact that she's just saying, again, if there's something wrong with the land, there's something wrong with us. Next image, please. This is another Indigenous artist named Sonia Kelleher Combs. And what she's done is actually frame pieces of antler and bone. And she said, growing up in a rural community, I was taught that the land and the sea would provide resources, spiritual and physical, necessary to sustain a healthy life. And I think it's fascinating how often the spiritual element comes up. Again, this is exactly what Maureen Grubin said. You have to take care of one another. And this is so important, never take more than you need. Interesting concept. The other thing that she talks about here is, again, kind of like the first artist, Galinan, Nicholas Galinan, that idea of things going into a museum becoming, again, like this, it's almost like a museum display case. She is distressed by the idea of some native pieces, again, going far away from the community and being almost layered like this. She has made this so you can't see it clearly. And again, the idea is she feels you cannot see clearly these pieces and that there shouldn't be where they are. So again, this is simply called remnant, and that same idea of patterns of history, family, and culture. She says this piece denies the viewer a closer view and distances you from the context. And that's true, again, whenever you've got a piece in a museum that is out of its context, you know, we've lost an enormous amount. Next image, please. The next couple are an artist named Meryl McMaster. And what she does is take a particular narrative or a really important image from the Cree people, and she makes a costume and creates it to put herself in the protagonist role, and then takes the photograph, okay, from these important stories. This is called Call Me Home. And what she's done here, and I'll show you two more as well, is she is out on Lake Diefenbaker in Saskatchewan, and she's posing as the Buffalo Child Stone. She said the story here is a child long, long ago who had lost their way and again been raised by buffalo. And then the humans who created him actually then found him later, and then he was torn, choosing between, do I go back to the people who made me, or do I stay with the buffalo who raised me? Could not make the decision, and instead asked to be transformed into a massive stone that was along this lake. So the stone became really sacred to the Cree people, and that stone was destroyed in the creation of a man-made lake in Saskatchewan. So this is a place of deep, deep grief and the importance to have this sacred stone destroyed. So what she's doing is portraying herself as that buffalo child against that lake and saying the stone is somewhere there in the lake and I'm connecting to it. So it's another really interesting way to connect with these stories, these narratives, as the artists portraying themselves in that role. And I think I've got two more of McMaster here. Next one, please. Yep, and there she is again. But I thought what I love about this show is every single artist has a different approach. They all are interested, again, in the impact of changing climate on Indigenous cultures, but they all approach it so differently. Some are doing crochet and knitting, okay? Others are stitching together photographs. Others are working with hide or bone. And Meryl McMaster is recreating the story with herself as the main character, which is a really, next image, a really neat, interesting idea. But I love
Oh,
the different approaches. It's not a huge show. You'll see when you come, it's not big at all. But each one you think, well, now that's a totally different way to think about that with completely different media. Completely different media. Okay. Next image, please. And we're going around the world to a piece called Danger Signs by Dilyara Kapova. It was an Uzbek artist. And this textile technique is a very traditional Uzbek technique. And she worked with traditional weavers to create this. But the designs you can see are not traditional, are very, very modern here. And the designs here are symbols of danger and warning, in particular dangers of nuclear areas. And here the connection is the Soviet use of this region as a nuclear testing ground and the site of factories. And so again, using some very, very traditional means to make a statement about the misuse of the land in this way. So again, each one of these has such an amazing story and context, but a different way to show us and make that point. I don't know. Priscilla, have you come across these kind of textiles ever in your studies?
I have not, but that's amazing.
And interesting that this artist sought out traditional weavers, to help with this idea. But I thought a fascinating thing. I don't know, each one of these gives you a million more ideas. Next image is called 9-Line by Yi Ai Lan. And here, this one kind of has to be seen in person too, but I don't know if you can see little teeny stitching marks or grid marks on this. This refers to the kind of the contentious territorial dispute over the South China Sea, which has been, of course, a big part of the news with, China very, very interested in this area, and that the coral reefs, of course, are in great danger there. And we're trying to build military installations in the area. So this photo collage is made from hundreds of images of the South China Sea that the artist has made over the last 10 years, and then digitally stitched them together. Again, making us think about the effects of climate change with these dark clouds on the horizon, and what it will mean to an already fragile area to have, more, construction and military facilities in that, or military activity in the area. Now, the next one is just for Priscilla. Okay. Priscilla, did you see this in person?
Yes.
I still can't get over. This is an artist named Mulyana, Indonesian artist who specializes in crocheting and knitting. And this projects out from the wall. And the idea here is to focus on the Indonesian archipelago, which is home to about 1/5 of the world's coral reefs. Many of the most biologically rich ones that, of course, is all threatened by, pollution and plastic waste and destructive fishing and acids. And again, what he is doing is using crochet and knitting, he says, surplus from the textile industry to create these 3D undersea worlds. And of course, if you look at this in person and on the slide, it's all these kind of shades of gray, which a healthy coral should not be. So the idea is that this is, a coral that's, just dying or dead. And it's just, the slide doesn't do it justice, but to see it in person, you just think, oh my, how did this artist create the pieces? How did they connect the pieces? And to create something that looks like a scientific model, but through crocheting, it's a rather impressive task.
it's kind of mind-boggling when you see it.
I-
I can't figure it out at all how he did it.
And I think it's mind-boggling if you don't know anything about crocheting and knitting. And then if you do, that you think, well, how in the world? How in the world? In interviews that I've watched with this artist is fascinating too. Again, as with the earlier pieces, a spiritual component. And he talked about how meditative for him the act of doing crocheting and knitting is, that was very much part of it. He said it was meditative and prayerful. But those shades of gray, again, are showing you, a suffocating a coral reef under layers of sediment. And next image, I think I'm threw in a couple more from him.
I just was going to comment. I love the way that both coral and knitting, wool, yarn, you both of them are, you sort of think as colorful, lots of different very vivid things, and then this picture there, it's really illustrates the graying, the demise of the coral through the coloration. It's
Yeah, it is just amazing. And he's got some more colorful ones. I think we threw in two more. Let's see what else we got. Oh no, this is another piece. It just, again, I'd love to see a video of just how it's all put together. That's interesting. And I think we threw in another detail. Yeah. But again, I love the diversity of approach, the diversity of media. And each one you think, well, I've never seen anything like that. But again, all helping us to focus in different ways on climate. And this looks like a much healthier reef. But yeah, this artist named Juliana. So Google him, from Java. And again, you can see more of the work and some healthier reefs, as well as reefs that aren't doing so well. Priscilla, I'm thinking you could do something like this.
Oh, no problem.
Yeah, that's what I thought. That's what I thought. I know
Yeah.
that this is your one of your many fields of expertise. But
Yeah.
again, I can't even imagine what is involved in this. I'm going to show you just a couple more artists to give you, again, I'm not going to cover everything in the show, but this is just a preview of coming attractions. This one's called On the Road by Urintuya Dagsimbu. And I apologize if I'm not pronouncing that correctly. This is a Mongolian artist. And this, I don't know if you can see this. This one, again, is much better in person. But again, that idea of climate change, economic shifts, really changing cultural identity. This piece talks about, due to climate change, traditional herding in Mongolia is less and less viable as an occupation. So the economic changes, political changes have meant that folks have to head en masse to, the urban centers and to the capital of Mongolia. So this is literally an image of centuries of nomadic life being absolutely upended. And you can kind of see that here in this crazy kind of tower of figures, disorienting and rapid change. And I think and this one has neat, interesting patterns too. Next image, I think, might be a better detail of it. Yeah.
Oh.
Oh, yeah. Wow.
Like tower of just people twisted and turned, and that things just in every way are not what they were. In each of these pieces, again, well, I say this all the time, but particularly on Zoom, it just doesn't do it justice. So again, remember, Saturdays and Sundays, good time to come to the museum. As we said earlier, parking is always a challenge, and that is just a fact, but it's easier on Saturday and Sunday. If you can get there before students get up, that would be the key. They might be taking those spaces to go to the library. I'm going to show you one more artist up for today. Oh, and they're going to go to the next one. And this is Abel Rodriguez, who is from Colombia. And this piece is so interesting. It's called The Tree of Life and Abundance. And this is so interesting because it's really, again, stewardship of knowledge and nature, like the other pieces, memory, family, landscape, knowledge, all these things come together. This artist is a respected elder and a healer of a community in the Amazon.
Mm.
And in his youth, he studied plant lore with his uncle and was a knowledge keeper in the community. And one of the spiritual exercises he did was to stay awake many, many nights in the forest. And you needed to observe and listen and absorb the teachings of the land. Isn't that interesting? He said he had never, ever drawn before, and he does not consider himself an artist. He said, I barely knew how to write, but I had a whole world in my mind asking me to draw the plants. Isn't that interesting? This
Yeah.
one too, when you see it in person, you'll look at this tree and think, wait a minute, you'll look closely. The tree is composed of many different trees and plants. The leaves are all different. You'll look up and think, well, there's a pineapple growing in that tree, or there's something else. So it's an amalgamation. And his idea, of course, is that that tree is feeding, it's dropping, you see it's dropping all kinds of fruits and things down to this animal community that it's feeding. And at the very, very bottom, I don't know if you can see it, right in the bottom at the base of the tree, teeny tiny, it's a little axe, which he
Oh,
says, again, alludes to the fact that, again, there is that potential to destroy the tree, to change the tree. Even that little teeny axe has a potential, shall we say. But the spirit of the universe, he said, is dropping fruits and seeds to nourish all the things below. And what's fascinating is, again, he wants the global community to better understand the diversity and the richness of the forest and what it contains. Next image, I think, is a detail of it. Yeah, this is one, again, you just got to see it in person, because you just pass it and think, what? And then you realize, oh, what he's done with the tree is absolutely fascinating. Combines so many things. And then these wonderful, you know, if we've got tapers and ring-tailed lemurs and things like that at the base. He is another artist, again, to Google, absolutely fascinating. And this piece has become part of the permanent collection. So happily, this tree of life is not going away with the other things in the show. And I think I threw in just a couple more. Abel Rodriguez's next image, please, to show you. Yeah. And again, you get some sense of his style, which is absolutely fascinating. And again, perfect artist to kind of wrap the whole thing up with, because again, it's intensely personal with every one of these artists, and reflective and thoughtful, and making you think about the impact of our choices. I think there's one more to end with. Next slide is, I think, the last one. Yeah. What I love too about him is he says his work is not really, he said, a work of art. He said they are works of knowledge. And I thought, wow, what a fascinating idea. That again, he said he's not an artist and he doesn't consider these artworks, but they're works of knowledge. And I thought, boy, if we think of everything like that, again, I think an important lesson in a very different way, I think, of us approaching this material as works of knowledge. So I hope that you will all get a chance. This show is up till, I think, mid-December. And as Priscilla mentioned, there's two other really good shows at the same time. One about Dante and amazing works that are illustrating Dante's Inferno, and Purgatory and Paradise too, but they're never as exciting as hell. That's just a fact. And an amazing show that I know Priscilla saw, Women Making Their Mark, all different, a selection of female artists from the museum's collection that Nancy Green has put together. And that's pretty it's pretty neat too. So I hope that you'll go see all three. And I'm delighted that in a couple of weeks, I'm going to do something about portraiture and photography with you. And I look forward to that in November. So if anybody's got any questions, happy to answer. If not, I would look forward to our next gathering.
Which is November 8th, a Monday.
Great. I shall be there. I shall be there. All right. Has anybody got any questions?
I feel as if I want to go back now and see it after hearing you talk about it. It really does make a difference to hear more what the artist's intent was. And
All right, Priscilla, let's go.
okay.
Yeah. And then I want to see you knit that coral reef. I think
Yeah, that's just amazing. But you know, the last artist too, I feel the same way about anything that's so detailed is, I can't even imagine how you start something like that.
I can't either. And I'm just fascinated by somebody, as I say, he says, I'm a knowledge keeper, I'm not an artist. And that the nature was speaking to him as an elder and a healer. I just thought that's a really fascinating thing to think. He's not worried about a scientific representation of something. It's more what he knows in his, I don't know, his heart and his head. I don't know. That's definitely to keep looking at, the tree of life.
Yeah.
There's the one with the passenger pigeons and the beadwork.
Yep.
Did you say that that was a Cornell professor that had done that? What is her field?
She is in art and I guess it's like art and design department. Her name is Jolene Rickard. And so she teaches art. She teaches also just very, very interested in indigenous cultures as an artist and as a professor too.
That was one that when I first saw the artwork, I couldn't figure out what the message was. It took a little explanation, but it's interesting once I got it.
Good. All right. I got anything else? If not, I'm just delighted to see you all today. And one of these days I'll get to see you in person.
Look forward to that.
Thank
Looking
you so
forward to a visit up there. Thank you very much.
My pleasure. Take care. Alrighty.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
See you in a few weeks.
All right. See you in a few weeks.
Bye.
Bye-bye.